Wow. Fan club? Are those your, what are they called? Posh Friends for PFFs? PFFs, I've learned it. So who are you wearing today, and are they all from Poshmark?
They are all from Poshmark. I'm wearing Thomas Dean shirt, which is a small independent brand. This watch is Bell & Ross. I don't know if you've heard of that brand.
I'm a basic guy, so no.
Oh, the belt is Gucci. You might have heard of that.
I think I heard of that, yeah. Price, $17?
Somewhere around that.
Okay. How many people in the room know Poshmark? I'm assuming a lot of, okay. I was gonna ask you to give us the 30-second spiel, but I guess we don't need that today. So let's start with sort of, we've talked on and off over the years, and I've just felt like culturally over the last year, I've sort of just felt an inflection point. I think the App Store rankings reflect that. Is it just the venture capital you're pumping into advertising, or tell me like what's happened over the last year?
So a couple of things. I think we have basically been in a very disciplined approach to growth. So if you think of sort of a lot of times you'll see apps just spike up and then come down. For us, it's been a gradual climb up the ladder. A lot of it is built on not just marketing and bringing in new users, but also the loyalty of our users. So when you think of our platform, really the fuel that drives it is the social commerce engine. And that's really all about people connecting, people following and building those deep connections. And the result is that you have sort of this tremendous loyalty both to the actual sellers on the platform and then for sellers on the platform to the platform.
And so early days, and I think up until maybe the last couple of years, when I thought of Poshmark, I thought of secondhand clothing, sort of across the spectrum of brands, and then it seemed, so that's still how I think about it mainly, and I think that's likely how most people think about it. But when we've talked recently, you've sent across a different message around full price clothing and brands actually launching on the marketplace. So was that a forced, like an evolution that just happened, or is that something you all have tried to push on the marketplace? So, because to me, it seems like there's still plenty of room to grow in secondhand. We'll talk about Marie Kondo in a second and that impact.
Yeah, we've always thought of us as a social commerce platform focused on fashion and lifestyle category, where resale is really the fuel that drives it. So resale, in a way, is retail. It really empowers anybody to be a seller, and certainly for you to have access to an unbelievable array of products that are available from people's closets. So that's sort of the first thesis. The second thing is, by enabling people to not just sell, but also curate on the platform, you really bring this social community together, which is something that is really missing, whether you think of physical retail, you think of online retail, everything gets very static very quickly. And
what do you mean by that?
Well, I mean, if you go to a typical store day one, it's a little overwhelming. There's a lot of products. If you go to that same store day two, it's a little underwhelming. Nothing has changed. Whereas when we look at our time today, when we turn around, when we look at whatever we're doing, we expect things to be changing. We go on Netflix binges, we scour Instagram, we are sort of constantly consuming and refreshing content. How do you simulate that same experience in retail? In Poshmark,
so you want retail to be, you're trying to bring back entertainment like you would have had when you window shopped in the real world. Is there a piece of that?
Absolutely.
So you're competing for time with social networks?
We're competing for time with social network, competing for time with TV, but really more importantly, we're delivering retail in a way that suits the social generation that we are on, which is constant consumption of content. We want instant access, but also we want sporadic conversations. If you go back to retail 30, 40, 50 years back, you could walk into a store, you'd ask, hey Jenna, I'm going for my girls' weekend, help outfit me something, right? Or Jason could walk into a store 40 years back and somebody might say, hey Jason, here's a hammer for you. And the hammer would be because you're potentially working on your deck and the store owner knows.
I also do not do, I'm not very handy.
Maybe walk into a stationery store and there's a specific pen for you.
That is beautiful.
Yes, yeah. Right there. because he knows that Jason is writing that phenomenal book on the evolution of Poshmark, right? So
a short book. Okay.
The whole sort of thing is this very intimacy that happens, which is not the same as sort of, walking up to a store clerk, sort of really engaging, or the store clerks are even missing, or engaging with a chat bot. That's not really social. In Poshmark, you have millions of sort of interactions happening constantly, and the result is that our average active user spends somewhere between 23 to 27 minutes a day. There's little over 18 million listings that are shared and curated every day. And we have a community of little over 40 million registered users. So it's become sort of something where it's become almost a parallel movement, which is, in a way, disrupting retail, but also democratizing retail.
What is the, have you sort of hit on and grabbed onto a wave that was already happening in retail? Like, I'm curious about the trends, either economic or in society, that have sort of driven what's happening on your platform specifically.
So my thesis, and sort of our team as a founding team, there's 4 of us who started the company. Our thesis was that social really is the key to discovery. I had a previous company called Caboodle, where we really talked a little bit about social discovery, but there was no actual transactions happening on the platform. The second thing was, in order to sort of scale, particularly fashion retail, you need almost an insane amount of inventory. So for example, at any given point in time in Poshmark, we have 75 million SKUs that are available. And third thing is, in order to provide the social...
Zero inventory on your...
Zero inventory. Everything is held by our seller stylists. You have to really engage and empower where anybody can be a seller. And in order to make selling fun, you have to remove a lot of barriers on the platform. For example, we do not have any public reviews. If you think of a large marketplace with no public reviews. In fact, the first 3 years, we didn't have any reviews at all, and the marketplace functions. So those were the thesis. Now,
why is that? Because that's scary. I mean, I may not be your target, but that scares me, right?
Really?
Yeah.
When you call Uber, do you look at the driver's review?
I want it to be, like 4.8 or above, or I'm canceling that.
Really?
No, I'm kidding. But I do. I'm not.
You could wait for a long time for that Uber or Lyft. The reason is, I think people don't want to spend time making all of those decisions. They want the platform to take care of it. So we provide a layer of inbuilt trust for both the seller and buyer. We provide shipping. We provide sort of all of the buyer protection, seller protection built into the platform. But going back to your original question, what triggered it? I think the first thing was mobile. And sort of the rise, when we first started the company in 2011, we bet the entire company is building a mobile app, which was considered very antithetical. And if I hadn't built a previous company, I may not even gotten the funding for this company to start the journey, because everyone thought that for buying, you needed a website. And we didn't create a website till 2-3 years into the journey. Second thing is, I think social media, which is both an accelerator in the joy of selling, but also an accelerator in the joy of obsolescence. So when you think of Marie Kondo, sort of what she's capturing into is not just a simple life, but the fact that our preferences and tastes are sort of accelerating constantly, that we should be rotating these items at a very fast pace. And then the third thing was really an accelerated demise of physical retail and major brands, where sort of this emergence of smaller brands is happening. And that's what you were talking about earlier, is we have hundreds of socially native brands that have been created by our community on the platform. That's not forced, that was naturally happening. What we did was we created a wholesale market, we added something called a boutique kind of concept, and that has sort of led to the acceleration of that aspect of our business. But resale is a fantastic business as well.
You mentioned a bunch of stuff there I want to follow up on. You just mentioned the wholesale business you started and how that ignited some entrepreneurs on the platform. So these entrepreneurs are essentially buying wholesale and they're just curating into collections that seem exclusive, or what's the consumer end of that?
So there's 2 aspects of it.
Yeah.
One is that the brands that are being curated there are in many times created by our community itself. So for example, we have a woman who's a large boutique owner. She's a mom of 2 kids, lives in LA. She had a big boutique on Poshmark, and now she's launched a brand which has one of the very high followings on the platform. Thousands of sellers are carrying that brand. And they will take that brand, and a lot of it is just dresses and other kinds of clothing, and they'll personalize it to their needs and their own style, which is almost, if you go to a traditional show like a Magic fashion show, People will pick up inventory, and the boutique owners will then go and dress it up in their physical boutiques. That's sort of how it flowed, because you have to connect that product to the customer. And what you are tapping into is not just one or two people, but thousands, in fact, tens of thousands of people picking that up. On the flip side, anybody can also get into the journey and start to create brands. So many of the seller stylists on our platform are now launching new brands, whether it's for kids or for men's or for women or jewelry brands, and they are following, sort of enhancing their distribution with other sellers on the platform.
I'm curious, as you grow more popular, now a top app, the brands that your sellers are selling, I'm sure are paying attention, right? The name brands, the legacy brands. What is your relationship, if any, with them?
So we've had some experiments with them. We've done a couple of larger experiments with the brands. I think one of the things that...
Liquidating inventory? Or what?
No, we actually did full-priced inventory. We've done liquidation of inventory as well. A lot of it is a different kind of model. So it's almost like if you think of social media, traditional media, and how they've partnered, not partnered, etc. I feel like social commerce platform like ours can really be a great partnership with traditional brands. And I think over the next few years, you'll see us doing more and more sort of partnerships and experiments and seeing and engaging in a way that can be very, very productive. One of the ways, if you can think about, is our seller stylist really can take that brand and take it to newer audiences that traditionally the brand is not able to reach. They can also act as, customer service. They can style it. They can also even fulfill it if the brand so chooses to do. And that gives a level of penetration into different demographics, different cities that is not so easy to get, especially with physical distribution and retail distribution kind of dying down. And then, if you put your product on a large website, who knows who's going to ever find that product?
So what's the hesitation? I'm assuming if it hasn't gone from experimentation to something broader, I'm assuming there's some hesitation on the legacy brand side.
Well, it's really figuring out the right model. So for example, on our platform, the shopping is a very sort of different experience. So people will come and I'll say, hey, so let's say you're selling this jacket. I'll say, I like this jacket. I may buy these shoes.
This is actually my wedding jacket from 10 years ago. I'm sorry, but
yeah, you may not never put it on.
I fit in it again. I mean, it's been a while. So
awesome.
Yeah.
Well, at some point, it might go in Jason's closet.
Yes.
So, and so as people are sort of touching and liking these items, you'll see the sellers engaging with them. And then like today, for example, is one of the days where we have our clear out, so people will drop prices. You'll get a notification saying, or I may, if I like your jacket, saying, hey, this jacket is for sale, and I may pick it up. So that whole sort of model of this very hyper-personal engagement, sort of a little bit of pricing flexibility, this sales cycle of starting from liking to actually purchasing, it's a very disruptive set of behavior and phenomena. And that's sort of something trying to figure out how do you fit it into a traditional fulfillment cycle and merge them together will take time.
Okay. So can you talk about any of the brands you've worked with?
We work with Rebecca Minkoff, and we did an early partnership with them. We, in fact, even drove a lot of traffic to their LA store and sort of did back and forth. Most recently, we actually put some of this was reverse, we actually put some of our seller stylist brands that they've created at Macy's and put it in the Macy's market. And that's been very interesting to see how that happened. There was a lot of traffic that went into the store. But one of the memes that I saw, which was quite surprising, was that many of the customers who came wanted to buy the items they were seeing in the store on Poshmark. They didn't want to go to the cash register, which I thought was quite shocking.
So came into the store, went on their phone.
And they said, where can I buy it? But, it was a physical item there.
I'm sure Macy's loved that.
It was a very strange thing. I was very counterintuitive to me. I did not expect that to happen.
So what do you think you keep on with that? Is that partnership still alive, or is that?
It was an experiment. It was a small experiment to touch it. I think the challenge of sort of working with different kinds of supply chain, demand chains, working through the fast inventory cycles, as well as sort of the new consumer behavior, I think will lead to sort of fundamental reinvention of many of these flows. I often talk about that the new generation of retail is discover anywhere, transact anywhere, and fulfill anywhere. Now, if you think about making that dream come true, it's a very hard problem. In fact, the only brand that's successfully doing it today is Apple, and that's doing it with very few SKUs. If you start to broaden it out and you have 75 million SKUs, how do you make it happen? It requires rethinking some of the problems.
One of the big questions I've had about your business and marketplaces in general is, how do you, when you come to the expectations around delivery and convenience, and maybe I can wait till tomorrow, but I don't want to wait 4 days. And you see, Amazon with their marketplace, they're able, because of their infrastructure, to accomplish that. eBay and Walmart starting to work with 2-day delivery, back-end services to help them fulfill. Do you need to figure out that piece and that speed to enable to really hit a different sort of scale?
So one of the bets we made very early on was that 2 to 3 day delivery is going to be a key advantage for us. So we actually created something called PoshPost in partnership with USPS Day One. Every single package that our seller stylists ship actually goes through a USPS priority box. There's no choice. That's a minimum expectation of every service that we ship. And on every seller stylist profile, you see their days to ship, which is same day, within 24 hours, within 48 hours. So you can pretty much compute roughly, what your expected time of delivery of the package would be. And because the shipping
you think buyers are computing that, or you?
No, most buyers, I would say, expect, depending upon the distance, a couple of days of service. In fact, we have buyers who expect to order on a Wednesday and wear that item on a Friday or a Saturday for an evening out. That's sort of the expectation which exists. Having said that, I think we are far from an Amazon SLA, and there's a lot of work to be done between now and then. But that's sort of the core infrastructure around shipping is something we thought through and actually fought a very hard-won battle with USPS to create this simple shipping system. And that also creates a long-term competitive advantage, because if you think about it, what we've created is a highly distributed logistics infrastructure where you're shipping from millions of small warehouses. Some are homes, some are actual real warehouses. And each of them is being shipped by a specific set of individuals using a shared virtual infrastructure, which also mirrors a physical infrastructure. That's a hard thing to replicate overall. And to have that entire system working and functioning without touching the goods, with a very high loyalty in the platform, that to us, over the long term, becomes something that you can take it down. You can take it down. Just think about it. If you have 2,000 physical stores, imagine if you could use our infrastructure to turn those stores into mini warehouses. So when the salespeople are not selling, they can actually be shipping out those items which people are buying from that store sitting in some other part of the world.
But you're not yet making promises on, since you're still relying on the seller to decide when they can actually get that out. You're not yet making promises like, an Amazon type promise that order within so-and-so or purchase within so-and-so.
We have an expectation setting that's there on the listing, but no promise. There's no guaranteed delivery within that 2-3 days yet, because it also depends on how quickly the seller ships that item.
So I think I've seen reported that you all did somewhere around, or were expecting to do somewhere around 140 million in revenue last year, which would I guess map out to gross wise, I don't know, 800, 700 million. Am I in the ballpark, or have you not talked about these numbers?
We don't talk about these numbers.
Okay, small group of friends here.
The only number which we did publicly talk about last year was that we had distributed a little over $1 billion to our seller stylist.
Okay, that's a lot of math for me to do, but that's over time. Okay. I guess I'm curious, where is the next set of growth coming from? Whose market share are you eating? Does the product need to evolve in many ways to sort of grab new wallet share? Or is Marie Kondo and Netflix enough for you guys?
Marie Kondo has definitely been a great sort of advocate of really recycling and looking at your closet in a new way. For us, I think we continue to grow our user community, and we've been growing that at a very fast rate, as you can talk from an App Store ranking perspective. We also continue to launch Posh Markets, and Posh Market is sort of a new innovation we did last year, which is effectively creating a very immersive app-like experience within the platform. So you can shop for men's and the whole app transforms to men, or you can shop for luxury and the whole app transforms to luxury. And so that is really a category expansion, but from a mobile native way. And that creates a very strong discovery social commerce experience, whereas traditional tabbing or searching doesn't work.
So it's not just like I'm navigating to a
No,
different...
you basically, you effectively, it's almost like at the source, you put a data layer and everything processed through the data layer. So everything you see. So let's say you were selling a whole bunch of different things in your closet, men's clothes, women's clothes, kids' clothes. If I enter the kids' market, I'd only see kids' stuff. We have something called a posh party. If I visited a posh party, you'd only see kids' stuff. So it's very immersive. You can switch back and go to men. So we've launched plus size, we've launched kids, luxury. So that's sort of one area of expansion. Second is continue to grow our network effect and build out bigger business. We publicly announced that we are expanding to Canada, and we'll be launching in Canada this year. So that's sort of another way of driving the growth. And third is to look at other lifestyle categories like home, which allow our seller stylists to participate in things that they love to do anyway.
And so in terms of grabbing market share, I mean, I'm assuming eBay is somewhere that you're looking at and saying we feel like we could carve off this part of the business or that part of the business, or is that not? We've talked about eBay.
Yeah. We've never really focused on a zero-sum game. I mean, we don't believe that in this world. I think zero-sum there's disruption happening. You know, if you think about physical stores shutting down, sort of many traditional brands either getting marginalized or disappearing. So disruption is happening. I think for us, we believe that this is really a new approach to shopping, but really not so new. It's really enabling an approach to shopping which is very human, which is very personal, that existed 50 years back. First came the big department store, then came the big websites, and pretty much took away the human from the experience. We're bringing back human. That's pretty simple. I mean, I think people are important.
People are important. That's a good one. We're going to open up to questions in a couple of minutes. Do you have any indication that any offline retailers are considering making a big play in sort of the digital space, like the digital re-commerce space? So I've been there's been a bit of consolidation among the digital players over the last few years. So still standing, Poshmark, ThredUp, The RealReal. I'm probably blanking on one or two, but there was consolidation a couple of years ago. And I thought there would be an appetite for acquisition, and maybe it's valuation. I'm curious what you see or hear in terms of retailers feeling like this is a place they want to get into either through acquisition or building on their own.
I think when you start to think of super disruption, which is what resale is doing beyond sort of social commerce, I think it's caught everyone by surprise. To be honest, even though we built a resale-based platform and social commerce platform, the scale and the speed of it has even caught me a little bit by surprise. I feel, I knew that we'd be successful, but to see how vibrant the space is and how pervasive people are using it is, and there's lots of reasons that are happening. Marie Kondo is not the only reason. I think the whole sort of social platform, the growth of social is really driving it. And I think when you think of the life cycle of a product and you start to extend it in a meaningful way, particularly clothing, it changes the entire way of thinking. So I think not just retail, but brands will have to respond to it. I think the challenge is how do you sort of disrupt yourself? And that's always been the problem, whether you look at media, right, where old school brands are sort of shrinking and disappearing, and new school brands are struggling to figure out the right model. And similarly, you sort of have this whole area in retail where micro brands are rising and people are trying to figure out, how to play with micro brands. Do I place micro brand in my store? Do I sort of do that? And by the time they decide that micro brand has evolved and another micro brand is born. So in this whole sort of world, how do you play it? And we believe sort of the approach that it has to be much more platform oriented as opposed to a specific niche or a specific sort of point.
So that's yes or no that you've had acquisition conversations with big retailers? Well, let's talk lastly, and I'll open it up to. So I think your company's raised something like over 150 million in venture capital. When I see that among digital players, I then look at Stitch Fix's background of 42 million raised and the business they built, and obviously they had $20 styling fee that helped absorb a lot of the logistics, but they own their own inventory. I'm curious for a marketplace with no inventory, A, what you need all that money for, and then Is that not a fair question? That's a fair question. What do you need all that money for?
Wait. I would almost say, when you think of a marketplace which is made up of cars, nothing, there's almost like virtual software, not even a shipping. What are they using that money for?
Uber?
I don't know, Uber, Lyft, what are these guys? I mean, you see...
Subsidizing.
Subsidizing?
Yeah.
Okay.
Why do you think you get a $20 ride to go 20 miles? No,
right.
serious question.
No, I really think that, to be truthful, I think a lot of the work we did early on was, getting a bunch of core infrastructure done, getting some of the technology part. And at this point, we're scaling. In fact, our last financing was almost 18 months back overall. So the business is scaling, and I think in the grand scheme of things, if you think of sort of new gen of retail and everything, 150, 160 million is a decent amount of money, but in today's world, it's not massive amounts of money.
Okay. We'll come back to that. Does anyone in the audience have a question? I'm sure we do. One right back here. Thanks. Please tell us who you are.
Larissa Summers with Optoro. You talked equally, and maybe it was the questions, but about transactional needs a la Amazon and shipping timelines and SLAs and customer expectation. But you also talked very interestingly and compellingly about the change in resale in terms of what people are looking for and doing and actually participating in of their own volition. And as a CEO and founder of such a compelling marketplace, how much time do you spend thinking about the transactional nature of what Amazon's requiring you to do versus what people are actually doing and expecting in such a unique place like Poshmark?
Yeah, so for us, one of our core philosophies is you focus on love and money comes. And it's really all centered around user engagement and really empowering our seller stylists to curate, to merchandise, to sort of focus on it. The transaction piece is entry stakes. You need to make the transaction work very smoothly. You need to make sure shipping works smoothly, make payments, payment distribution, dispute resolution, customer service. And that's the stuff we spent the first 3-4 years really working through, fought many battles, and won most of them. And that became the core infrastructure. And then it's all about creating a fair playground where 5 million people can come and play and sort of enjoy. And for most people who are selling, it's part of their sort of enjoyment, not just money making. And then it also certainly makes money on the side. And for some people, it is the core money making, but they still enjoy the process of selling. And our sellers kind of become influencers from that perspective, as opposed to influencers becoming sellers. The powerful part is that people are looking for that. People are looking for those spontaneous conversations. People are looking for that curation. People are looking to find and be delighted and be merchandised in a way that the stores are not giving them. So it isn't just about resale, in my opinion. It is really about curation and merchandising. The fact that the sourcing of that merchandising in large part today comes from closets allows the merchandising and the products to be quite diverse. And that's what's delightful. And that's sort of what we see is people wearing a beautiful dress that could be high-end, and then they could be wearing a necklace or a pair of shoes that could be $10 or $20. And that's sort of what, if you look at what I'm wearing here, there's something that's $20, it's something that maybe $300, $400.
Okay. Do you have any more questions? I have a bunch more, so I'm going to go right now. Instead of getting a non-answer on the venture capital question, I'm going to go with something I hope is practical. What is a marketing channel right now that you all have been pleasantly surprised about, and then what is one that is now challenged or disappointing for you?
So surprisingly for us in the last year or so, television has been a great advertising channel.
You do regional or national?
Mostly regional right now, some national, but it's been a channel of tremendous growth for us. Disappointing wise, I would say middle of last year, Facebook really started to have challenges. What
does that mean?
I mean, they were not scaling. Facebook as a channel was not scaling. Instagram was not scaling for a period of time, but I think they're back to being much more robust channels.
Does that mean too expensive, or like unpack that for me a little bit?
Not effective.
Okay. Why do you think that was?
I think this was all around the Q2, Q3 timeframe when Facebook was going through sort of its own revectoring in a deeper way.
They're going through a lot of
A lot
things,
more,
right?
yeah.
So you're back. Are you back investing heavily in those places?
I mean, in today's world, if you're going to do digital advertising, it's hard to not use Google and Facebook. Those are the largest
I've
platforms.
heard
right?
that.
Yeah,
being part of a media company.
yeah, and so and then if you add TV, those are sort of the three big channels. But we have, fairly diversified set of sources overall in terms of how we reach. And a big part of our reach is very organic. It's really our users going out and spreading the word, doing a lot of physical events and talking to other people. So having a social community, that becomes one of the very powerful ways in which you grow.
1 year from now, if we were to chat again and maybe off the record and I get a little more candor in some places, what would the success, like what would you want to be telling me about that? Like what does success look like a year or two now for Poshmark?
I think our men's business right now is just embryonic. It's just growing. In fact, I was at an event in Phoenix last week, and it was the first time I had 10 or 12 men that I could stand with and take a picture. So our men's seller stylist is growing. I would love to tell you a year from now that most of your clothing, Jason, that you're buying is from Poshmark, and many of the men here.
Okay. Any more questions? Otherwise, one right here, and then we'll wrap up. Thank you, Claire.
Hendrik Lipscher from Blue Cape Ventures. Recently, you added Serena Williams to your board of directors.
Can you stand up so we can hear you? I'm sorry.
Sorry. So recently, you added Serena Williams to your board of directors. She's a champion. What is the thinking to add such a person to your board of directors? Thanks.
Serena Williams,
yeah, we just announced that Serena Williams has joined our board of directors. The thinking to me was to really bring someone who can bring a bunch of traits. Number one is a very, very deep thinker and sort of has an experience on board. Second is understands our consumer. And third is understands entrepreneurship. And I was looking for someone who brought all those things together. The thing that surprised me in the very first conversation is
it
how
helps
much
that she's also Serena Williams, right?
It also helped that she's Serena
Okay.
Williams. But in the first conversation, she actually not only knew about our platform, had been using it, and had been thinking of integrating her fashion line into the platform. And I thought, I don't know. But actually, it was all true. It was not just sort of just love being shown. She actually had been doing it and has been using it, and also knew many Poshers, as we call our users, firsthand, and knew their stories in terms of how they are thinking of quitting their jobs, full-time moms, and doing it. So it was like someone who was very authentic. And for us, our community is super authentic. We've sort of generally shied away from people who are just, just spokesperson. And Serena is the real thing as far as Poshmark is concerned. And of course, she's amazing.
Thank you, Manish.
Thanks.
Yeah.